A question that's been on a lot of people's mind lately: how well would specific countries do during a zombie apocalypse? Now, of course, this is just one man's opinion. There are several factors that go into this. I'm sure reading your comments would probably change my mind on some of these. It's just off the top of my head as a geography/history guy who talks about this stuff like literally every day. First thing we gotta discuss is what type of zombies are we talking about here? Because that can make a huge difference. For this scenario, I am not talking about World War Z zombies. If you've seen that movie before, I'm pretty sure no country can stop World War Z zombies. But I'm also not talking about Walking Dead zombies in a couple different ways. The zombie infection in this scenario will only be able to spread by blood transmission. It is not in the air, which means if a person dies, they don't automatically become a zombie no matter where they are in the earth. It does send its host into a state of extreme uncontrollable rage, which means it can run. Think, for example, 28 days later zombies or 28 weeks later. The zombies cannot swim or walk underwater. Again, that would just make this way too difficult for all the countries. Only human zombies. No animals or plants are infected. They're not forming like random zombie monsters either. They're just humans. Finally, people that were already deceased before the infection do not become zombies. They're not like coming out of the ground. Again, this is one of those things that would make it too difficult for the specific countries to stop. So I'll be ranking different nations, F being the worst and S being the best, on how well I think they would do. I also have a map here to talk about geography, population density, sometimes like military spending. To start things off, this is going to be a real easy one. I think one of the best countries during a zombie apocalypse would be Australia. Not only is it positioned in a really great part of the world, but also the Australians put a lot into their defense. There's about 25 million people that live on this country/continent, which also really helps it. I think population density can be kind of a double-edged sword in a zombie apocalypse, but for Australia, I think it really helps. I should mention also, whatever country I'm ranking, I'm just assuming the zombie infection is not starting here. You know how there always has to be a patient zero? Well, whatever country we're focusing on, we're gonna just give them the benefit of the doubt that they do not have patient zero. So no matter where the zombie infection started, whether it be the Americas, Africa, Europe, or even Asia, I do think Australia would be really good. And while we're talking about Oceania, we might as well put New Zealand up there as well. Now, New Zealand, I'm not sure is going to be as well defended as Australia. I mean, obviously, if you compare the two's military expenditure, Australia is doing a lot better, but New Zealand is even more remote. I mean, a lot of people say this is the best place to be during a nuclear apocalypse as well. Now, as for a country that I do not think would do quite as well is China. I'm gonna have to put them at C for China. I didn't mean that to C. I didn't mean that. Again, we are assuming the infection is not starting in the country we're focusing on. However, China having over 1 billion population, now being the second most populated country on Earth, that's gonna make things really difficult. They are probably gonna have to build an even bigger and longer Great Wall. Now, I did put them at C. I'm not saying they're gonna do horrible because they still have a very high military budget. That's a whole other thing we have to talk about. In my scenario, tanks are gonna do way better against zombies than in movies and television shows. I mean, I can't really blame television shows. Obviously, it's making the story a lot more interesting, the fact that a tank can't just roll in and stop thousands of zombies. However, I do think in reality, these things are gonna do really well, like way better than I think a lot of people are expecting. So I definitely want to keep in mind this data, especially the countries with the top 3 battle tanks. USA with over 6,000, and then China and Russia over 10,000. However, I just think this is too much land and too much population to protect. Maybe China would do well for a good amount of time, but eventually I believe they would collapse. I mean, they literally border 14 different countries as well. The infection can come from almost any direction. Let's start with our first European country. I also believe the British would do phenomenal in this situation. I mean, throughout their entire history, their whole goal has just been to protect the British Isles. If the zombie infection is not starting here, I think they're gonna last for some time. They're also the 4th largest military spender as well, which helps. This one might surprise a few people, but I'm putting Iran in A tier. I think Iran would survive for a really long time. And this is almost purely based on geography. The country of Iran is a literal fortress. The population here is also really spread out as well, so they can defend a lot of different points. I should also remind everyone that this is happening in the current year of 2023, so Iran is already ready to defend pretty much every inch of their border. They've been on high alert for a while now. Iran was also one of the most sanctioned places on Earth before February 2022 of last year, which I actually think is going to help it a lot in the situation. They don't need any outside powers. They already don't 100% rely on global trade, so it doesn't really matter what goes down around them. They're going to figure out a way to make it work. Also, again, these zombies do not swim, so the Persian Gulf and the Caspian Sea will help out a little bit. I'm only putting this country in A because it is still smack dab in the middle of the huge Eastern Hemisphere. While we're on this region of the world, I'm actually going to put one of their neighbors in literal last place, Iraq. This is actually actually several videos all over YouTube talking about how horrible the geography of Iraq is. They kind of made it that way intentionally. It's just completely flat, and historically speaking, this region has struggled. Again, sticking to the Middle East and another neighbor of Iran, I think Afghanistan, who shares a similar geography to Iran, would do well here, but not quite as well as Iran. Superpowers around the world like the Soviet Union and the US know just how difficult it is to conquer Afghanistan. I think the zombies would figure that out pretty soon too, as if the zombies actually use their brains or whatever. It doesn't matter. Something I want to talk about real quick before we continue is air superiority. I am of the belief that air superiority is not going to matter much against zombies at all. Tanks are good, planes not quite as much. I mean, the US, for instance, has learned the hard way that air superiority does not necessarily win you the war. Just because the world would rule the skies, I really don't think it would help that much stopping the zombie apocalypse. Planes realistically would still do good at like strategically striking key positions. For instance, taking out some of your own bridges to stop a zombie horde from getting through. With that said, I just really can't rank Russia that high on this list. They just have too many downsides, I feel. I mean, not only is it the biggest country on Earth, but also most of their population lies here. I feel like there would be just like countless zombies at some point in Siberia, and then at some point a massive horde would just come in and take out like most of their population here, or I just mean like slowly pick them off until it's uncontrollable. Even if the infection starts someplace in Europe, I mean, we've seen in the world wars that Russia has a tough time defending all this land. Though they do have high military spending and a lot of tanks, I just don't think it's going to be enough. They also can't use their classic strategy of meat shields. They've always just tended to kind of throw a lot of bodies at a situation or conflict, and that can kind of help them out a lot. In this situation against zombies, that's going to have the exact opposite effect. There's just too much land, and it's just way too flat over here. With that said, I think a lot of places in Eastern Europe would also struggle, unfortunately. Ukraine, Belarus, the Baltic states, even if you are in NATO, I don't think NATO is really going to matter much against zombies. I'm sorry. It kills me to do this to you, Poland, because you've already been through so much. You've been through enough. I feel like even the Polish people themselves, though, would kind of understand this ranking. I want to talk about Canada, but we can't talk about Canada until we discuss the US, and I'm really struggling on where to put them at here, but I think a strong B is okay. Even if the first zombie or patient zero doesn't start in the US, I think it's only a matter of time before it gets here. If it was in the Eastern Hemisphere, I think the US would be able to hold it back for quite some time. If it was raging in one of these continents over here, maybe the US would function for a couple years. But there's over 300 million people living here. It would eventually get here. We're also like insanely reliant on outside resources and things like that. We'd probably be the one to infect all of North America first with somebody. Actually, that's really likely to happen. Sorry, Canada and Mexico. Now, the US does have the top military spending, which is why I'm going to put them at B, but it's just going to be so much chaos here. Like, there will be zombies all throughout the country. I think the Northeast would definitely struggle, especially considering so many people right here. So many buildings and things for them to hide in. Now, the US does have a lot of citizens with their own weapons, however, which will also help them in this situation. There's also a really nice mountain range here that can protect certain areas. The US is just insanely hard to put on this list. I feel like they have to be broken down state by state because, like I said, I know the zombies would eventually get here, but each state would do significantly better or worse than others. I probably need to make a tier list on individual states for this same zombie invasion. With that said, I think I can safely give Canada a B as well. Their biggest worry, like I said, I think the US is probably going to bring in the first zombie infection. This is going to be Canada's big problem point here. Just like I said with the US, 50% of the population is literally right here, so it is going to be tough. I guess it's kind of a similar situation where other parts of Canada would actually probably do very well, but yeah, different places not so much. Now, this is actually a super easy one for me. I'm just going to get this right out of the way. North Korea is absolutely S tier. They are literally nicknamed the Hermit Kingdom. They've been preparing for basically a zombie invasion for the last 70 years. Not only do they have among the most tanks in the world, but also they're one of the most sanctioned places on Earth. And like I said, I think that actually helps a lot of these places in this scenario. Now, I have to admit, their border with China is a pretty big concern. However, they do kind of have a natural barrier up here with these mountains. I think if they redirect a lot of their resources from staring at South Korea and move them more north, they're going to do really well. I don't know if they're going to want to do that even in a zombie invasion. They'll probably still want to annihilate South Korea. And I might as well rank South Korea right now. South Korea might be in an even better position than North Korea. Even if North Korea falls, they're already prepared with a huge barrier to stop anything from here. Again, I hate to keep repeating myself here, but this is a situation where it doesn't start in the focus country, so I think South Korea would do good. I don't think we would have a train to Busan situation if it doesn't get to Busan in the first place. I feel like it's about time I finally address the situation of trees and forests and jungles. I think that would be a really, really good thing for the zombies in this situation. And there is no other place with more trees than the Amazon rainforest. Well, wait, I guess actually Russia and Canada technically have more trees, but Brazil has them like, you know, super consolidated like that. I think Brazil would do okay, but they have a lot of things to worry about. Now, of course, most of their population lies along the coastline right here, so they're really gonna have to deal with two issues: not importing something and getting the zombie infection that way, but then constantly worrying that their South American neighbors aren't going to leak some zombies into the Amazon rainforest. Because if they do, they will never be able to get those things out. Can you even imagine the absolute massive horde that could be accumulating in the Amazon rainforest completely unnoticed? Brazil could be thinking they're doing great for years and years until one day just everything absolutely falls when like millions come out of the trees. I'm thinking of like a Vietnam situation. Maybe it would be a thing where like waves would come out at night attacking the populations along the coastline. Brazil also has a lot of their population packed into only a few cities, which would also be a pretty big issue for them. They could actually start filling in neighboring countries for some of the same reasons I gave their neighbors. Again, just like too flat, it's gonna be really difficult to stop zombies. Actually, except for Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan, I might give them a higher ranking. I think it's safe to say Japan would also do pretty well in this situation. I'd be extremely concerned if a zombie actually got to the islands. I think in that case, they might be done. I mean, there's just literally so many people packed into Tokyo. It's a little concerning, but they're a pretty rich country. If they can just focus on like protecting their borders, maybe closing down their ports, that would help. You're probably beginning to notice a little bit of a theme here, but I do believe islands kind of have a natural advantage. Keep in mind also, it wasn't until just recently humans in general discovered Madagascar. The first Portuguese navigator found it out in the year 1500. We technically found America before we founded Madagascar. The first humans might have made it to that island 2,500 years ago, which is crazy considering humans started in Africa. We had hundreds of thousands of years to find this and we didn't. I think the zombies would also struggle as well. A really difficult one for me is Germany, because I do think Germany would do a lot better than their Eastern European neighbors, but I don't really know how much better. I'm gonna have to put them at a strong C. They're a very rich nation, but it would be very difficult to stop the continued onslaught coming from all sides here. Switzerland, on the other hand, I think is in a little bit of a better spot. I'm actually gonna put them in B. I mean, the entire existence of Switzerland has been to defend their territory. They're kind of one of those countries like North Korea where they're perfect for zombie invasion in a way. Since World War II and even beyond that, they've already kind of had to face potential attacks from all sides. Luckily, diplomatically, they've been able to play their cards right and not get involved in anything too chaotic, but they always have a plan just in case that were to happen. They are fully prepared to blow bridges, hide their people in the Swiss Alps. Also, their population has really high gun ownership too. I think the Swiss are one of the only countries in continental Europe that would do pretty well. Let me know if you'd like to see a part 2 by hitting the like button and subscribing. Obviously, there are more countries I can get to, but there's specific regions like India, Africa, and the Nordic countries that I honestly kind of just feel like I need a little bit more time to think about. And big thanks to my patrons. Help, this is the real Drew. I was kidnapped and that's the imposter.
Argentinian
The slow,
grandpa.
depressing Portugal
Schengen,
Right
follow
Amateur.
Archaeology.
Is alive.
JohnDenver,
KirinoIsBestGirl,
Phresh Animations,
TheGreatRalphy,
the Polish
I
Mexican
kidnapped Drew.
Commonwealth.
His ransom is 5
ZaneyBoi,
fish,
and
and
why
he's
am I
at
doing this?
308 Negro Arroyo Lane.